Okay, so welcome to Economics A-level Unit 1, Competitive Markets and How They Work and Why They Fail examination from January 2011 paper. The purpose of this video is to go through this Edexcel examination and essentially go through the questions and the answers and talk about the topics around that come up in the questions. So let's get straight away into the questions. Remember, this is January 2011 Edexcel Economics A-level. Please see the rest of my video tutorials to see the other papers, Unit 2, 3, 4, and also from other years. Obviously, the most recent two examinations are not available because the board tends to keep them for mock examinations and only teachers are allowed to access those papers, but we'll do all the others. Okay, so section 1, answer all the questions in this section. You have to spend about 35 minutes in this section, and there's 8 questions in this section, so normally it should give you about 4 minutes per question. And let's get started. So the first question, statement 1, is question 1, statement 1. Bonuses to financial sector workers in the City of London exceeded £13 billion in 2009. Statement 2, a 50% tax on bonuses above £25,000 is fair. Which of the following best describes the two statements above? So there's 1 mark for correctly getting the answer correct, and there's 3 marks for the explanation. Okay, so let's see. Option A, statement 1 is normative and statement 2 is positive. Option B, both statements are normative. Option C, statement 1 is positive, statement 2 is normative. And D, both statements are positive. So firstly, in this answer, we obviously need to know the difference between positive and normative statements. So a positive statement is one which is based on fact. It can be tested to be true or false. A normative statement is one that is based on a value judgment. It can't be tested to be true or false, and it's a subjective statement. So someone who's making it is making a subjective statement. You must use the correct terminology in your economics papers, because what that does is that signals to the examiner straight away that you are a higher level, a higher grade candidate. You don't have to use incorrect terminology to kind of get your thoughts across. The examiner's going to be thinking, does this person really know what they're talking about? I've marked exams before at university, and I know that when I'm looking for answers, I'm looking for people to use the correct terminology, because what that does is that tells me straight away in a very succinct, short, snappy way that you know what you are talking about, and that's very important to keep in mind throughout your exam. Okay, so the other thing to note in here is that in these types of questions, section A, where we've got 8 questions, you can see that, look, there's 1 mark for the correct answer and there's 3 marks for the explanation. So the explanations tend to be that you have to kind of, if you look at the mark scheme, they tend to say that you have to have a definition, and then you have to apply the definition to the question. So keep that in mind when we're going through all of these questions. So for question 1, the definition for a positive statement, is it's based on fact, so it can be tested to be true or false. And a normative statement is a value judgment. It is subjective, and it can't be tested. So can't be tested true or false. I'm just going to do T or F. Okay, so it's important, like I've said, use the correct terminology. Now be careful with normative statements that you don't say, oh, this is just someone's opinion, because in the mark scheme it specifically says don't accept just an opinion. You have to say this is a value judgment. You have to say it is subjective. You have to say it can't be tested for true or false. Now, in my opinion, you're going to get around about 2 marks for, or one to 2 marks for positive and normative definitions. So out of the 3 marks that you have for explanation, you've probably got yourself about 1 to 2 marks here. The remainder, sort of 1 to 2 marks, is going to come from applying what does it mean to be a positive statement to the question, and what does it mean to be a normative statement to the question. So if we do that, a positive statement in this question is the one that we can test to be true or false. So let's have a look at, can we test the statement 1 to be true or false? And yes, the answer is we can. How could we? We could go to all the City of London financial sector workers and ask them what they were paid in their bonuses in 2009, and we could basically test whether that number is greater than £13 billion. If the answer to that is true, then we know that we've got a true. We know that this is a positive statement. We can test it. It's based on fact. Okay, now you might think the examiners will often talk about, you might think, well, how could I go and test this? Candidates might look at this and think, oh, how can I go and test this? But ask yourself the question, if the information was available, could I go and find out the answer to this statement, and would I get a true or a false? If the information was available, you have to make the assumption that you could go and get that information if it was available. Okay, is statement 2 a positive statement? Let's take it like that. A 50% tax on bonuses above £25,000 is fair. Okay, what information could you get that you could then use to test whether this statement is true or false? Well, there's a big hint in this statement which tells you that it's not actually a positive statement and that it's a normative statement. And the big hint is the use of the word fair. Right? So, applying that, we could say that normative statements, statement 2, because uses the word fair, we, here's the next page, oops, didn't mean to do that, sorry. Let's just blank this out. We can't test this to be true or that's statement 2. We can't test statement 2 to be true or false. Okay? And the reason being is that it's using the word fair. How can we test whether or not it's fair to charge people who've got paid a bonus over £25,000 a 50% tax? We can't do that. Right? It's a value judgment. We can't do it. So yeah, that's the answer. The answer is therefore statement 1 is positive and statement 2 is normative. So the answer being C. Okay. But again, just remember definition, application of the definition to the question. I will be handing out model or sample answers to these questions. So these are my rough notes that I'm writing along here to kind of explain what I'm talking about. But you shouldn't worry because you'll be able to get this stuff from the website with model notes. Also, the mark scheme is useful. It is sometimes difficult to understand what the mark scheme is all about, but you can have a look at that. Okay, let's have a look at the next question. Next question shows us a diagram: output of capital goods, output of consumer goods. The diagram shows a production possibility frontier for an economy operating at point X. The opportunity cost of producing 75 units of consumer goods is, so again, 1 mark for the correct answer, 3 marks for the explanation. Okay, so let's look at, before we look at the answers, let's look at the question. The question says the opportunity cost of producing 75 units of consumer goods is. Okay, so now applying what we said earlier on, where we tend to have a definition and then an application. So the definition in question 2, 1 would be, if you are, I believe it will be for the PPF definition. So explaining and defining what a PPF is. 2 would be for the opportunity cost. Because if you know the definitions for these two, and you understand what these two things are, you will then be able to apply it to the question to get the correct answer. Okay, so we know that a PPF is the possibility, or where an economy can produce goods between choices of one type and another type. And as the diagram shows, this PPF is between capital goods and consumer goods. We know that the opportunity cost of producing one set of goods is normally what you have to forego from the other goods in order to have what you're asking for. Okay, let's explain that a little bit more clearly. So the opportunity cost of you sitting here watching these videos is the times you could have spent playing PlayStation 3 and FIFA 12 or something like that, or going out and hanging out with your friends. But no, you gave that time up in order to watch me explain Edexcel examinations to you. Okay, so that's the opportunity cost that you've basically had in order to give time to watch this. In order to apply to this question, let's just make the definitions first. So let's just make the definitions here. Where are we? Here we are. Okay, so for a PPF, it's the maximum output combinations of two goods in an economy if all resources are fully employed. Okay. Okay. Now the definition of an opportunity cost So the definition of an opportunity cost and again, use the correct economics terminology. You've got to get used to that, yeah? It's the value of the next best alternative foregone. Okay, now you've got to remember that, look, you want to try and get an A star in your economics A-level, so you have to be absolutely ruthless in making sure that you get every single mark, or you try and get every single mark. Okay, now you could just sit there and say, yeah, the definition, the opportunity cost in this is that what you have to give up of the capital goods in order to have 75 units of the consumer goods. Yeah, okay, that's applying, or to some extent applying, the definition of opportunity cost to the question, but you haven't been very specific. Whereas if you say, okay, point one, the definition of a PPF is this, point two, a definition of an opportunity cost is this, applying it to the question. Now, let's have a look at that. Now, let's have a look at applying that to the question. So here's the PPF that we have here. Let's just draw it out. Different color. Oops. Okay. Go back to our original color. This is 90. And the at that level is 100. Okay, now if we were at 0.0 of the consumer, and this is capital, we would get 90 units of capital goods if we took 0 units of consumer goods, right? So this is what you start off with. If we took 0 units of the consumer goods, we would get 90 units of the capital goods. But we've actually decided to take not 0, but 75. So we are here. So we take 75 units of the consumer goods. Now, what do we get if we take 75 units of the consumer goods? We know that we're along this point on the PPF. The corresponding number of capital goods that we will get, or that we can produce at 75 consumer goods, is 60 capital goods. Okay? What have we given up in order to get those 75 units? It's this much here, which is 30 units of capital goods. That's your answer. So the answer is B. Okay, but it's very important that you know to start from the correct place. You started from here at 0 units of consumer goods here. Then you said, okay, I know at 0 units of 0 units of consumer goods, I would get 90 units of capital goods. But actually, I've decided to be at 75 units. 75 units of consumer goods, which means that I'm along this point on the PPF here. That gets me 60 units of the capital goods. Now, as you know from the definition of an opportunity cost, it's the value of the next best alternative foregone, i.e. what you give up in order to have something of the consumer goods. It's got to be the difference there. That's what you've given up. You've given up 30 units of capital goods, which you could have had you have not had any of the consumer goods. Okay? So that's your answer. Let's go back to the blue. Okay, we'll continue this. Thank you.